I wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about being a shot caller and what that means in prison. You see, every yard has one man who is the shot caller. He's been appointed by the gang to run the yard. The parlance is that he has the keys to the yard. He's been appointed with a very simple job. His job is to make sure that all of the drugs that are sold on the yard, he gets a cut, whether of the drugs themselves or of the money that's paid for them, and he gets it to the leaders of the gang. If they're back in the shoe, he finds a way to get some drugs back to them. If he can't, he sends money to a P.O. box that they operate. That's his job, because businesses and gangs aren't that dissimilar at the high end. And they want to appoint somebody who's able to run the criminal enterprise of a prison yard like a business. Generally, he has the authority to appoint people under him. For instance, there's often not a lot of interaction between buildings on a prison yard. So he'll need to appoint somebody who's in charge of each of the buildings that he isn't in. These people aren't actually shot callers, but they're said to have the keys to the building, meaning that they have the authority to make decisions in that environment because the actual shot caller can't always be contacted to give an opinion. This is important because you got a bunch of violent felons running around, and if they're allowed to just do what they want with no accountability to anyone, well, it'll be bad. Chaos will ensue. I bring this up because I had an accusation leveled against me recently that I was trying to sound like I'd been a shot caller in prison, and I need to be really clear about this, 100% emphatic. I never called a shot in my life. I had no authority in the gangs or anything like it. In fact, if Kate had come from the back and said, hey, we've talked about it and Aaron is the new shot caller on the yard, everybody would have been confused and felt that that was a bad choice. Myself included, I would have been confused why they chose me, and yes, it would have been a bad choice. I lack the qualities that make a good shot caller. If somebody comes to me and says, yes, Aaron, I owe a bunch of money and I'm sorry, but I just want to go home to my wife and kids, please don't have me stabbed to make an example out of me. My God, I don't want that job. That's the worst job I can imagine. The qualities that do make a good shot caller are not what people traditionally think make a good shot caller. Hollywood has really skewed people's opinions on this. I know that the thought that comes to most people's head is 250 pounds of muscle, tatted back, just ready to go on the riot, full of anger and violence. If you were hiring a manager for your business, are those the qualities that you would look for? In fact, generally, gangs are looking for somebody who has a cool head on his shoulders. Somebody who has criminal sophistication, understands how the system works, what the little tricks are, and who understands how to leverage violence to get obedience. The idea that you might stab somebody or have somebody stabbed if they don't do what you want is often a far more effective tool than an actual use of violence. You figure if a shot caller just comes out with a hard program, anybody who ever does anything wrong is going to be stabbed the next day. Well, he's going to run out of soldiers real quick because half of them are going to be in the hole and the other half are going to be in the infirmary. On the other hand, if a shot caller is just very lackadaisical and says, you guys do what you want, don't worry about it, people are going to think he's weak and quit giving them the money, and it won't get to the shot callers back in the shoe or to the heads of the gang, and he'll end up getting whacked. It's a balance. You don't want Arnold Schwarzenegger, you want Don Corleone. Now, I've said that I would have been a poor choice for a shot caller. I don't want that to be interpreted as I was disliked. In fact, I was very well liked in my environment. You kind of have to be. You figure this is a serious level 4 yard. There are some of the most dangerous and violent men in the entire country on this yard. If I'd been walking around all day just disliked with people thinking, man, I sure would like to hurt that guy, I would have been hurt over the course of 5 years. Somebody would have stabbed me. That to the side, I was useful. I was the lieutenant's clerk. I dealt with the administrative and correctional officers just all day long, every day. Knowledge is power. That's true in an institutional environment, and it's true out here. Just something as simple as my noticing that there were more correctional officers than usual that showed up to work on a given day, and that they were all tense, might lead to my telling the shot caller, hey, I think they might be searching tonight. That's big information in an institutional environment. That's potentially life-saving information. It was a nominal service that I could provide the gang that didn't impugn on my morals. I didn't feel like it was going to get anybody hurt. And it was definitely useful on their end. Finally, you have to bear in mind that I was incarcerated for the murder of a child pornographer and actually had paperwork to demonstrate this. That's a big deal on an active yard. These people make a display of hating sex offenders, and understandably so. So for them to be able to actually bring up, hey, that guy over there, that's what he's in for, it came up literally on a daily basis. Now, I do need to be clear about one final thing, is everything that I've talked about, this is a yard at High Desert State Prison in California. It was a serious 4-yard, but it's just a single yard. And it's only one ethnic group, too, the whites. That's all I actually know about. It's all I actually experienced. Anyone who says that they know how the entire system works, how everybody ran their program, they're full of it. Every prison, every yard, even every building has its own flavor, its own set of rules. And you can't speak authoritatively about any place that you didn't do time, at least to some degree. I've said that there was one shot caller on the yard, that he was in charge, and that's true. But I don't want that to be interpreted as what other people did or said was unimportant. Yes, it's a militant environment. Yes, he's a dictator. If he says jump and you say no, he's probably going to have you stabbed because he has to make a point. He has to maintain his authority. But that doesn't mean that you can't insert your ideas, your beliefs into conversation, that you can't assert who you are. I was always trying to find ways to lessen the likelihood of violence. There was a real possibility of a race war between the whites and the blacks pretty much the whole time I was there. Things were tense. I'd always do what I could to point out that it would be a bad thing, and not in a cowardly way, which, let's be clear, on this issue, I am cowardly. I am afraid of being stabbed. I have no interest in it. And I don't want to stab anybody either. And of all the moronic reasons to stab somebody or be stabbed, the color of our skin just doesn't make sense to me. But cowardice is not a logical argument. Instead, I could point out that violence isn't profitable, that the drugs will quit flowing if there's a riot, or that everybody likes getting their canteen, their food, and their coffee, and their visits and their phone calls, and those things all go away if there's a riot. These are real-world things that I was able to point out that I feel like occasionally people listened, and perhaps I mitigated the likelihood of violence while I was there. This isn't just a prison thing. In everyday life, we often have that opportunity. Maybe you're talking to somebody who you know is making a bad choice and they're just not going to listen to you. Or maybe you have a boss who just has more authority than he has common sense. Oftentimes, quietly asserting your beliefs and living by them is much louder, much more forceful than screaming them at somebody and trying to make them understand your